Badiraguato, Sinaloa. Where the mountains are cruel, the land is dry, and the government forgets. Where children grow up faster than the corn, and die younger than the goats. That's where Rafael Caro Quintero was born, in 1952. To a family scraping by on beans and silence, a father who had nothing. A future that promised even less. No electricity, no schools, just sun-scorched dirt and an unshakable feeling. If I stay here, I die invisible. But Rafael wasn't like the others. He didn't pray for help. He started planting, not just maize, but moda, marijuana. By 17, he was selling ounces. By 20, he was growing acres. And by 25, he was running ranches the size of cities, hidden behind hills and armed guards. He understood something few did back then. The Americans didn't want less drugs. They just wanted cleaner hands. So Rafael offered a solution. He became the middleman, the farmer, the supplier, the silent force behind the smoke. And then he took it further. He founded the Guadalajara Cartel, not as a gang, but as a government. A cartel that operated like a shadow state, with its own rules, its own borders, its own foreign policy. He didn't just bribe cops, he assigned them. He didn't just pay politicians, he promoted them. And every brick of weed, coke, and heroin that crossed into America crossed with his blessing. In a land with no king, Rafael crowned himself. He wore silk shirts, drove Ferraris through dirt roads, and turned jungle towns into narco fortresses. But for all his cunning and cruelty, he still believed in fairy tales. And one day, he fell in love. Her name, Sara Cosillo. Elegant, educated, connected. The niece of a governor. The kind of woman men like Rafael were never supposed to touch. But Rafael didn't ask permission. He took what he wanted, because he wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing immortality, and love was the one move he couldn't control. They called it a fairy tale, but fairy tales don't end in blood. Her name was Sara Cosillo, a woman born into politics, pearls, and power. She was the kind of beauty that opened doors, and the kind of name that closed them to men like Rafael. She was forbidden. She was untouchable, and that made her irresistible. Rafael saw her across a room, and something snapped. Not in his heart, he didn't believe in hearts, but in his ego, because here was something money couldn't buy. He courted her with gold, with flowers, with danger. Some say she fell in love. Others say she was taken. Even today, no one's sure what the truth is. But the headlines screamed, kidnapping. The whispers said, romance. And the system? The system finally started to look up. Because Rafael had crossed a line, not with guns, not with drugs, but with politics. He wasn't just a criminal anymore. He was a liability. And then came Enrique Kiki Camarena, a former Marine, a father, a DEA agent, sent to Mexico not just to observe, but to dismantle. He moved quietly, watched closely. He infiltrated farms, watched transactions, mapped the empire from the inside out. He didn't carry a gun. He carried a notepad, and in 1984, that notepad burned Rafael's world to ash. One raid, one field. A marijuana plantation the size of 1,000 football fields. Gone. 8,000 tons of product, torched. Street value, $160 million, vanished in smoke. Rafael didn't just lose drugs, he lost respect, he lost control, and in the drug world that's worse than death. So, he made a decision. Not just revenge, a message, a declaration of war. Kiki Camarena was kidnapped, in broad daylight, dragged into a house in Guadalajara, where the walls heard screams for 30 hours, bones broken, skull crushed, life extinguished. It wasn't an interrogation, it was an execution. Cold, brutal, personal. And when his body was found, bound and dumped in a shallow grave, the world finally saw the monster behind the money. The US was outraged, the DEA humiliated, and Washington, D.C. had a new mission: take down Rafael Caro Quintero, by any means necessary. 1985 Guadalajara, city of tequila, cathedrals, and secrets. but none darker than what happened inside number 881 Lope de Vega Street. A house with a red gate, a torture room behind polished walls. This is where Enrique Kiki Camarena took his final breath. He was more than just a DEA agent. He was a symbol of American reach, of justice knocking on cartel doors. But in Mexico, symbols get destroyed. Kiki had gotten too close, too smart, too effective. He exposed Caro's billion-dollar marijuana fields. He named names. He threatened the system from within. So Rafael struck back. They didn't just take him, they paraded him, dragged him in front of doctors to keep him alive, just long enough to hurt him more. He was tortured for more than 30 hours. Electrodes, pipes, blunt force. His ribs shattered, skull cracked, eyes swollen shut. And all the while, a tape recorder was running, picking up questions, moans, silence, then screams. It wasn't just brutality, it was theater, a performance for the cartel gods. One meant to echo across borders, and it did. When Kiki's body was found dumped like garbage, bound and buried in a shallow grave outside a ranch in Michoacan, Washington lost its mind. For the first time, the US realized this wasn't just about drugs, it was about war. They mobilized Operation Leyenda, the largest DEA manhunt in history. And they didn't just want justice, they wanted vengeance. The CIA got involved. Mexican officials were flipped, exposed, blackmailed. And one by one, Guadalajara's gods began to fall. But Rafael wasn't done running yet. He had one last play to make. And as the net closed in, he vanished into the green hills of Costa Rica. For a moment, it looked like the Prince of Sinaloa might escape justice. But even paradise isn't safe when you've spilled American blood. Costa Rica. Lush, green, quiet. The kind of place where rich men disappear and ghosts learn to breathe again. That's where Rafael ran. Not like a criminal, like royalty in exile. He brought Sara Cozio with him, the woman who, depending on who you ask, was either his prisoner or the only person he ever truly loved. They lived in a mansion, white walls, tall palms, bodyguards at the gates. To the locals, he was just another rich Mexican businessman, polite, charming, invisible. But the DEA wasn't fooled, because Rafael hadn't just killed a man. He had humiliated a superpower, and now that superpower wanted blood. So they followed the whispers, tracked license plates, bugged phones, paid off informants. And on April 4th, 1985, justice came crashing through the gates. DEA agents and Costa Rican authorities stormed the compound. No warning, no mercy. Rafael was taken down at gunpoint, shoved into a helicopter. Sarah screaming, helicopter blades chopping the air like war drums. They flew him straight to Mexico, and for the first time, the king knelt. Behind bars, he was no longer the narco prince. No silk, no soldiers, just concrete, iron, and memory. In 1989, he was convicted of Camarena's murder, sentenced to 40 years in prison. His empire dissolved, his name turned to myth. But even in a cage, his legend grew. Inside, he studied, read law books, watched the world evolve without him. Cartels rose and fell, new kings were crowned, but they all followed his blueprint. Because Rafael had laid the foundation. He was the prototype, the original architect of the narco state. And in 2013, 28 years into his sentence, something unbelievable happened. He was released. Clerical error, the court claimed. But no one believed that. Not in Mexico, not in Washington. Some say judges were bought, others say politicians were threatened. What's certain is this: one of the most wanted men in the world just walked out the front door and disappeared. Again. 2013, he walked out of prison a free man, but he didn't walk into the same world he left behind. The narco empire he helped build, it had evolved, splintered, modernized. The Guadalajara cartel was gone, buried under indictments, body bags, and betrayal. And in its place rose new kings: El Mayo, El Mencho, El Chapo, men who worshipped him, feared him, then replaced him. But Rafael Caro Quintero, he wasn't done. Not yet. He didn't want revenge. He wanted relevance. So he slipped back into the shadows, not as a boss, but as a phantom. They said he hid in the Sierra Madre, mountains thick with pine, mist, and silence. A place where even drones lose their way. He built alliances, quiet ones. Back-channel meetings with remnants of old guard players. Young sicarios sent to test him, and each time he reminded them, "I was building cartels before you were born." But there was a problem. The DEA hadn't forgotten. Not Kiki, not the tape, not the grave. And in 2018, they added him to their top 10 most wanted list. A $20 million bounty, dead or alive. Still, he moved like smoke. No phones, no fingerprints, only whispers and payoffs. Yet the world was closing in. Cell towers were watching, satellites listening, and Rafael was growing old. He no longer ruled with fear. He ruled with myth. And myth doesn't stop bullets. Then came July 15th, 2022. Sinaloa. A joint Mexican Navy task force surrounded a compound deep in the hills. The sun hadn't even risen. And just like that, after 9 years in the wind, Rafael Caro Quintero was in custody again. No shootout, no chase, just boots, dogs, and silence. They found him lying in brush, hiding like a wounded animal, his hair gray, his body slower, but his eyes still defiant. They put him in cuffs. And for the second time, the prince fell. They put him back in a cell. But they couldn't cage the legend. Because Rafael Caro Quintero didn't just traffic drugs. He trafficked systems. He pioneered a model that outlived him, outgrew him, outfought borders, laws, and time. Before him, traffickers were street-level thugs. After him, they were CEOs, diplomats, ghosts with gold watches. He professionalized the business. Introduced vertical integration before Silicon Valley knew what it meant. Grow it, process it, move it. Buy the judges, silence the press, shake hands with power, then wash the blood off in champagne. And even now, as he rots in a Mexican prison, the machine runs on, smoother, faster, smarter. The Sinaloa cartel, once just a faction under Guadalajara, is now a global empire, shipping to over 50 countries with supply chains more efficient than Amazon. And in the mountains, in whispered corridors, in cartel corridos sung by children, they still speak his name. Not out of fear, out of legacy. Because Rafael wasn't just a narco, he was the original, the teacher, the first blueprint, the one who proved that if the state abandons its people, someone else will fill the vacuum. He didn't need votes. He had soldiers. He didn't win hearts. He bought them. And now, as new names dominate the headlines, El Mencho, Los Chapitos, CJNG, they all owe a debt to a man in a concrete cage. Because every time a bribe is paid, a body dumped, a plane loaded with white powder lifts off toward the US, Rafael's fingerprints are still on it. Not visible, but unmistakable. Some men become ghosts when they die. Rafael became one while he lived. He didn't vanish into legend. He built it, with blood, silence, and a smile. You can lock the man in a cage. You can bury his body under steel and concrete. But his system, his blueprint, it's still out there. Moving product, buying silence, killing truth. Rafael Caro Quintero didn't just escape justice. He rewrote what it meant.